Guess what, guys? Our heroine today got into big trouble while feeding a pup. What part of she's trying to help don't they understand? It's crazy, but that is exactly what we're getting into today. But before we step into the Leakin' Kings territory, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. It helps our pack grow and ensure you never miss a new release. I want this comment section to be buzzing today. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from? And while you're listening, timestamp your favorite parts. If a scene makes you laugh or swoon, let me know right when it happens. Are you ready? Let's get into the story. The poker was still warm from Ivana's fireplace when she swung it at the head of a future king. To be fair, she didn't know he was a future king at the time. She only knew that 4 massive wolves had invaded her cabin, her sanctuary, the one place in the world where she was supposed to be safe from the universe's particularly cruel sense of humor. And one of them, the one with silver-streaked black hair and eyes like winter frost, had just reached for Pip. Her Pip. The poker connected with his forearm with a satisfying thunk. The wolf didn't even flinch. He just stared at her with an expression that suggested he was reconsidering his entire life's trajectory. "She hit me," he said, his voice carrying the wonder of someone discovering a new species of insect. "The Omega just hit me." "I noticed," said the golden-eyed wolf, the one who delivered the destiny speech that had shattered what remained of Ivana's sanity. His lips twitched with barely suppressed amusement. With a poker, the frost-eyed wolf continued, still marveling. "Yes, Kale, we all saw," said a third wolf, this one with copper-red hair pulled back in a way that probably violated several laws of physics. He leaned against the doorframe like he'd just settled in to watch dinner theater. "Though I don't think she's finished. Look at her stance. She's winding up for another swing." He was right. Ivana was absolutely winding up for another swing. "Nobody touches Pip," she growled, her Omega instincts warring with her common sense in a battle that common sense was losing spectacularly. "I don't care if you're royalty, nobility, or the moon goddess herself. That pup stays with me." The fourth wolf, who'd been silent until now, stepped forward. He was the largest of the group, with shoulders that suggested he'd been built for war and a face that suggested he'd won every battle. His dark hair was cropped short, military style, and his eyes were the deep green of old forests. "The pup," he said quietly, "is not actually a pup." As if on cue, Pip began to shimmer. Ivana had seen wolves shift before. It was as common as breathing in her world. But she'd never seen anything like this. Light poured from Pip's small form, golden and ancient, the kind of light that predated electricity and probably fire. The cabin's shadows fled to the corners like they'd been personally offended. When the light faded, a boy stood where Pip had been. Not a pup. A boy. Maybe 8 years old, with silver hair that caught the firelight and eyes that held the weight of centuries. He wore tattered clothes that had probably been fine once, before someone had tried very hard to make sure he stopped existing. "Hello, Ivana," he said, his voice carrying the same ancient awareness his pup eyes had held. "Thank you for the venison. And the arguing with cobwebs. That was entertaining." Ivana's poker clattered to the floor. "You could talk," she said faintly. "This whole time you could talk." "Yes. And you're not a pup." "No. And you're apparently royalty." "Crown Prince, technically," Taram said with a small shrug. "Though I prefer to think of myself as the boy who didn't die despite everyone's best efforts." The golden-eyed wolf, the leader, moved into the cabin with the kind of fluid grace that made Ivana think of predators and bad decisions. "My name is Darius," he said, offering a slight bow that somehow managed to be both respectful and condescending. "Commander of the Royal Guard. These are my seconds, Kale, whom you assaulted with impressive accuracy, Reese, who's currently enjoying this far too much, and Marcus." "Wait." Ivana's head snapped up. "Marcus?" "Not your Marcus," Darius said quickly, reading her expression. "Different Marcus entirely. Ours has better taste in cookware." The large wolf, Marcus, inclined his head. "Ma'am." "Don't ma'am me," Ivana muttered, her mind still trying to process the fact that her Pip was actually a crown prince who'd been listening to her complain about cobwebs and stolen frying pans for 3 weeks. "This is insane." All of this is insane. I agree, Taram said cheerfully. He walked to the fireplace and sat down cross-legged, looking perfectly at home despite having just revealed himself as secretly human this whole time. But I like insane. Sane was boring. Sane tried to murder me. The temperature in the cabin dropped several degrees. Who? Darius said, his voice carrying enough menace to make Ivana's Omega instinct scream at her to hide behind something large and stable. Tried to murder you? Taram picked at a loose thread on his tattered shirt. My uncle. Well, technically my uncle's assassins. Uncle Mordecai doesn't like to get his hands dirty. He prefers to delegate his fratricide. Patricide, Kale corrected. Your father was his brother. Was, Taram echoed softly. Past tense. Because Uncle Mordecai made it past tense 3 months ago. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that had weight and teeth. Ivana found herself moving toward Taram before she'd consciously decided to do so. Her Omega instincts didn't care about politics or royal bloodlines or the fact that she'd been harboring a prince. They only cared that this child, because he was still a child, crown prince or not, had been hurt, hunted, and was currently sitting in her cabin looking far too small for the burden he carried. She sat down beside him. Your father was King Aldrich. It wasn't a question. Every wolf in the territories knew about King Aldrich's death 3 months ago. The official story was a hunting accident. The unofficial story, whispered in taverns and passed between pack members like contraband, suggested something far more sinister. Yes. Taram leaned against her shoulder the way he'd done 100 times in his pup form, seeking comfort. He was a good king. A good father. Uncle Mordecai hated him for both. Darius crouched down to eye level with Taram, his expression gentling in a way that made him look less like a predator and more like someone who genuinely cared. We've been searching for you for 3 months, little prince. The entire royal guard. Every pack in every territory. Where have you been? Running, Taram said simply. Uncle's assassins were thorough. They killed father, tried to kill me, and would have succeeded if I hadn't shifted into pup form and jumped out a window. He smiled, but it was a broken thing. Turns out being small has advantages. I could hide in places they couldn't reach. I survived for weeks in the castle walls, stealing food from the kitchens, listening to servants gossip about the poor dead prince. You weren't dead, Ivana whispered. No, but I was dying. Taram's ancient eyes met hers. I made it to the Whispering Woods 3 weeks ago. Uncle's assassins followed. They were faster, stronger, and I was so tired. They caught me behind an old oak tree and decided to finish what they started. His hand found hers. Then you found me. And you didn't ask questions. You didn't demand proof of worth or breeding. You just saved me. You were bleeding, Ivana said helplessly. What was I supposed to do? Leave you. Most would have, Darius said quietly. A wounded pup in the Whispering Woods, clearly involved in something dangerous? Most wolves would have walked away. Especially a rejected Omega with no pack protection. The words stung because they were true. Ivana had no status, no power, no reason to risk herself for a strange pup who could have brought trouble to her door. Except trouble had come anyway. Trouble was currently standing in her cabin, wearing Royal Guard uniforms and explaining that she'd accidentally bound herself to the future king through ancient laws she didn't understand. The law of life debt, Reese said, apparently reading her expression. He'd finally stopped lounging and now stood with his arms crossed, his earlier amusement replaced with something more serious. When a royal's life is saved by an unbound wolf, that wolf becomes bound to the royal by destiny. It's old magic, written into the very foundations of our world. I didn't ask for destiny, Ivana protested. I just wanted to save a pup. Destiny, Kale said dryly, rarely asks permission. It just shows up and ruins your Thursday. It was my Thursday. Ivana pointed at him accusingly. I was making terrible stew and arguing with myself and being perfectly content with my hermit lifestyle. Then you all arrived and started talking about destiny and ancient laws, and she stopped, a horrible thought occurring to her. Wait. What does bound by destiny even mean? The 4 royal guards exchanged glances. Well, Darius said carefully, that's complicated. Uncomplicated. You're his guardian now, Marcus rumbled. by law and magic. Where he goes, you go. His life is your responsibility until he comes of age and takes the throne. Ivana laughed. It was not a sane laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd hit their breaking point and kept walking. I'm a rejected Omega living in a cabin that's one strong breeze away from collapse. I can barely feed myself. You want me to guard a crown prince? We don't want anything, Darius said. The magic chose. You saved his life. The bond formed the moment you decided he was worth saving. That's not fair. No, Taram agreed softly. It's not. You didn't ask for this. You didn't ask to be rejected by your mate, cast out from your pack, or forced into solitude. You definitely didn't ask to find a dying prince in the woods. His small hand squeezed hers. But you did find me. And you saved me. And now we're bound together, whether we like it or not. I don't like it, Ivana said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. Liar, Taram said gently. You've been lonely for 6 months. I've been lonely for 3. We found each other. Maybe that's what destiny actually is, 2 lonely people finding each other when they need it most. Damn the boy for being wise beyond his years. Damn the universe for its timing. And damn her own traitorous heart for wanting this, for wanting to keep this strange, ancient-eyed child who'd brought life back into her empty cabin. So what happens now? She asked, looking at Darius. Now, he said, we take you both to the royal palace. Mordecai currently sits on the throne, claiming regency until Taram comes of age. He's told the kingdom that his nephew died with his father. If he discovers Taram is alive, he'll finish what he started. Ivana finished. Yes. So we're going to walk into a palace controlled by a murderer, with a child he wants dead, and hope for the best? Darius smiled, and this time it was the smile of a predator who'd found worthy prey. Not exactly. We're going to walk into that palace, reveal that the prince lives, and watch Mordecai's carefully constructed lies crumble around him. Then we're going to put the rightful heir on the throne. That's a terrible plan, Ivana said. Do you have a better one? She didn't. Of course she didn't. She was a rejected Omega whose most ambitious plan this week had been to fix the leak in her roof. But as she looked at Taram, at this boy who'd trusted her enough to survive, who'd chosen to reveal himself rather than keep hiding, she felt something shift inside her. Something that had been dormant since Marcus had rejected her, since her pack had cast her out, since she'd decided that being alone was safer than being hurt again. It felt dangerously like hope. When do we leave? She asked. Darius's expression softened. Dawn. Pack what you need. Say goodbye to your cabin. I'm not saying goodbye, Ivana said firmly. I'm saying see you later. Because after we deal with this murderous uncle situation, I'm coming back here. You might not want to, Reese said. Palace life has its perks. Running water, for instance. Food that isn't more water than substance, stew. My cabin has character. Your cabin has structural concerns. Same thing. Kale snorted, the sound almost like a laugh. I think I'm starting to like her. Don't, Ivana said. I hit you with a poker. That's not a good foundation for friendship. It's not a traditional foundation, he agreed. But I've built relationships on less. As the royal guards began discussing logistics, watch rotations, travel routes, how to sneak a prince and his newly bound guardian into a palace crawling with assassins, Ivana found herself looking around her cabin. At the crooked shelves holding her grandmother's books. At the fireplace that smoked when the wind blew wrong. At the windows that rattled in their frames and let in drafts that had opinions about her life choices. It wasn't much. But it was hers. And now she was leaving it to protect a boy who wasn't actually a pup, guided by 4 royal guards who'd invaded her Thursday, bound by destiny to a future she hadn't chosen. The universe, she decided, really needed to work on its timing. But as Taram leaned against her, his small form radiating trust and hope and the kind of stubborn determination that probably ran in royal bloodlines, Ivana thought that maybe, just maybe, this particular cosmic joke might have a punchline worth waiting for. Even if it meant her quiet, hermit life was officially over. Even if it meant walking into danger with nothing but a poker and spite to protect her. Even if it meant facing a future that terrified her more than any rejection ever could. Because sometimes destiny didn't ask permission. Sometimes it just knocked on your door on a Thursday night and demanded you be braver than you ever thought possible. And sometimes, if you were very unlucky or very blessed, you answered. Chapter 2. Wolves in Royal Clothing. The journey to the royal palace took 3 days, which gave Ivana plenty of time to regret every decision she'd ever made, up to and including being born. I'm just saying, she told Darius on the second morning that if destiny was going to bind me to a prince, it could have at least provided comfortable transportation. My grandmother's rocking chair has better suspension than this cart. Darius, who'd been riding beside the cart with the kind of perfect posture that made Ivana's spine hurt just looking at it, raised an eyebrow. We're trying to avoid attention. Royal carriages tend to attract notice. So do carts that sound like they're dying, Ivana retorted. Every bump sounds like a declaration of war between wood and metal. She has a point, Rhys called from his position at the rear. I've heard symphonies less dramatic than this cart's suffering. We could walk, Kale suggested. We could not walk, Ivana said firmly. She was an Omega, which meant her endurance was impressive for everyday tasks, but catastrophic for multi-day forced marches with wolves who probably considered marathons light exercise. Some of us aren't built like war machines with legs. I think that's the nicest thing she's called us, Marcus rumbled from the driver's seat. Don't get used to it. Taram, who'd been sitting beside her in the cart, laughed. In the 3 days since leaving the cabin, he'd remained mostly in his human form, though Ivana had caught him shifting into a pup when he thought no one was looking. Old habits, she supposed. When you'd spent 3 months surviving as a pup, reverting to that form probably felt safer. Tell me about the palace, Ivana said, trying to distract herself from the cart's latest attempt at self-destruction. What should I expect? Taram's expression grew thoughtful. It's large. Intimidatingly large. Father always said it was built to impress foreign dignitaries and terrify children during hide-and-seek. He was right on both counts. How large are we talking? 300 rooms, Darius supplied. Give or take. The original architects kept adding wings every time a new king took the throne. The palace is now less of a building and more of an architectural argument. 300 rooms, Ivana repeated faintly. Her cabin had 3 rooms, and she still got lost sometimes. Where am I supposed to stay? The Guardian's Wing, Darius said. It's adjacent to the Crown Prince's quarters. You'll have a suite of rooms, staff, anything you need. Staff? Ivana's voice pitched up an octave. People who work for me? I can't have staff. I argued with a cobweb last week. About rent. I'm not qualified to manage people. The cobweb had it coming, Taram said loyally. It wasn't paying its share. That's not helping. You'll adapt, Darius said with infuriating confidence. You've survived 6 months alone in the Whispering Woods. You can survive palace life. The woods don't have etiquette, Ivana pointed out. The woods don't care if I eat with the wrong fork or curtsy at the wrong angle. The woods just let me exist. Then keep existing, Kale said. But do it in a palace. With running water and food that's recognizable as food. You're all very fixated on my stew, Ivana muttered. Because it haunts us, Rhys said solemnly. I saw things in that pot. Things that defied classification. Ivana threw a piece of dried bread at him. He caught it midair and took a bite, grinning. The banter helped ease some of her anxiety, but not all of it. The closer they got to the palace, the more real this became. She wasn't just protecting Taram anymore. She was walking into the center of political intrigue, assassination plots, and royal machinations that she understood about as well as she understood advanced mathematics. Which was to say, not at all. Tell me about Mordecai, she said quietly, when they stopped to water the horses that evening. Darius's expression darkened. What do you want to know? Everything. If I'm walking into his territory, I need to know what I'm facing. Darius studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Mordecai is King Aldric's younger brother. He's ambitious, charismatic, and utterly ruthless. When Aldric became king, Mordecai became his advisor. He was good at it, knew how to navigate court politics, how to make alliances, how to make people trust him. But he wanted more. He thought he should have been king. That birth order shouldn't determine worthiness for the throne. Darius's jaw tightened. He wasn't entirely wrong. Aldrich inherited the crown because he was older, not because he was more qualified. But Aldrich grew into his role. He became a good king. A great one, even. And Mordecai couldn't forgive him for it. So he killed him. We can't prove it, Cale said, joining them. The official report says it was a hunting accident. Aldrich's horse spooked, threw him, and he broke his neck. Convenient. Clean. Impossible to dispute without evidence. But you know it wasn't an accident. We know, Marcus said, his deep voice carrying absolute certainty. Aldrich was the best horseman in the kingdom. His horse wouldn't have spooked without cause. And the timing was too perfect. Mordecai was conveniently positioned to take regency, claiming he was honoring his brother's memory by protecting the kingdom until Taram came of age. Except Taram was supposed to be dead, Ivana finished. Yes. If Taram had died with his father, Mordecai could have claimed the throne permanently. No heir, no obstacles. He'd be king by default. Ivana looked over at Taram, who was sitting by the fire, poking at the flames with a stick. So when we reveal that Taram is alive, Mordecai will deny everything, Darius said. Claim he had no knowledge of the assassination attempt. Welcome his miraculously survived nephew with open arms. Then try to kill him again, but more carefully this time. That's a terrible plan, Ivana said. It's the plan we have. Why not just not go to the palace? Keep Taram hidden until he's older, stronger, better able to defend himself. Rhys shook his head. Because Mordecai is destroying the kingdom. In 3 months, he's raised taxes, dissolved alliances, and alienated half the noble houses. If we wait, there won't be a kingdom left to save. Ivana rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. So we're going to walk into a palace, reveal that the prince everyone thinks is dead is actually alive, bind my fate to a child with a target on his back, and hope we can outmaneuver a murderous regent who's had 3 months to consolidate power. Yes, Darius said. And you wonder why I preferred my cabin. Your cabin had structural concerns. My cabin didn't have assassination plots. That you knew of, Cale said helpfully. Ivana glared at him. I'm going to hit you with another poker. Looking forward to it. Despite everything, Ivana found herself smiling. These 4 royal guards, these alphas who should have intimidated her Omega instincts into submission, had somehow become familiar. Comfortable, even. They teased her, argued with her, and treated her not as a rejected Omega but as an equal. It was disorienting. It was also kind of nice. What's the plan when we arrive? She asked. Specifically. Step by step. I need to know what I'm walking into. Darius settled onto a log, gesturing for her to sit. She did, and he began outlining the strategy with the kind of military precision that suggested he'd been planning this for weeks. We'll arrive at dawn, 3 days from now. There's a servant's entrance on the east side of the palace, less guarded, easier to slip through unnoticed. We'll use my authority as commander of the royal guard to gain access. Once inside, we'll make our way to the throne room during morning court. Why morning court? Because that's when Mordecai holds public audience. The throne room will be full of nobles, courtiers, and witnesses. He won't be able to deny Taram's identity with that many people present. Won't he just have us arrested? He'll try, Cale said. That's where we come in. The 4 of us are still technically part of the royal guard, even if we've been searching for the lost prince for 3 months. Mordecai can't move against us without cause, and protecting the crown prince is literally our job. What about me? Ivana asked. I'm nobody. A rejected Omega with no pack, no status, no reason to be there. You're the prince's guardian, Darius said firmly. Bound by ancient law. That gives you status whether you want it or not. I don't want it. We established that, Rhys said. But you have it anyway. Destiny is inconvenient like that. Taram appeared beside her, his small form casting long shadows in the firelight. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I would understand if you wanted to go back to your cabin. This isn't your fight. Ivana looked down at him, at this boy who'd been through so much, who'd lost his father, who'd survived assassination attempts and 3 months of running, and who was still offering her an out because he was kind. It became my fight when I found you bleeding behind an oak tree, she said. I don't abandon people. It's a character flaw. It's your best character trait, Taram said, and hugged her. Ivana hugged him back, ignoring the way her eyes stung. She'd spent 6 months convincing herself she didn't need pack bonds, didn't need connection, didn't need anything but solitude and spite to survive. Turned out she'd been lying to herself. "All right," she said, pulling back and wiping her eyes with more force than necessary. "We're doing this. We're walking into a palace full of assassins and political intrigue, revealing a supposedly dead prince and probably starting a civil war. But we're doing it together." "Together," Taram agreed. "Together," the 4 guards echoed. And sitting there by the fire, surrounded by wolves who'd somehow become her pack without her noticing, Ivana felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. She felt like she belonged. It was terrifying. It was also wonderful. And as they spent the rest of the evening planning, arguing, and occasionally throwing bread at each other, Ivana thought that maybe, just maybe, destiny had gotten something right for once. Even if it had the worst possible timing. Even if it was going to get her killed. Even if walking into that palace tomorrow meant facing fears she'd been running from for 6 months. Because sometimes belonging was worth the risk. And sometimes family wasn't the pack you were born into, but the one you found bleeding in the woods on a Wednesday evening. Chapter 3. The Throne Room Revelation. The royal palace looked like someone had given an architect unlimited resources and a severe case of megalomania. Ivana stared up at the towering structure, all white marble, gold accents, and spires that seemed to be competing for which could get closest to the moon, and felt her anxiety spike to new and creative heights. "This is where you want me to live?" she hissed at Darius. "You'll get used to it," he said, which was not reassuring. That's what people say about plagues and tax collectors. Also true. They'd arrived at dawn as planned, slipping through the servants' entrance with an ease that suggested Darius had done this before. Several servants had recognized him and welcomed him back with the kind of relief that spoke to his importance in the palace hierarchy. No one questioned Ivana's presence. Apparently, when you walked with confidence beside the commander of the royal guard, people assumed you had a right to be there. Ivana did not have confidence. She had anxiety wearing a confidence costume, and the costume was starting to tear at the seams. "Remember the plan," Darius murmured as they navigated the palace corridors. The inside was somehow more intimidating than the outside, all polished floors, expensive tapestries, and the kind of oppressive wealth that made her cabin look like a particularly ambitious pile of sticks. "Walk into throne room," Ivana recited. "Reveal prince. Don't die. I've got it." "You're paraphrasing. I'm simplifying." Taram, who was currently disguised in a servant's cloak with the hood pulled low, squeezed her hand. "You'll be fine," he whispered. "You threatened royal guards with a poker. A throne room should be easy. Those royal guards were in my cabin. This is their territory." "Then we'll make it ours," Taram said with the kind of naive confidence that came from being 8 years old and legally immortal due to destiny. They reached the throne room entrance just as the doors opened for morning court. Ivana could see inside, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings, marble columns, and a throne at the far end that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone. Sitting on that throne was Mordecai. Ivana had expected someone obviously villainous, scarred, perhaps, or with an evil laugh that he practiced in mirrors. Instead, Mordecai looked regal. He had Taram's silver hair, though his was streaked with distinguished gray. His features were sharp but handsome, his bearing confident, his smile warm as he addressed the assembled court. He looked like a king. That, Ivana realized, was what made him dangerous. "He's good at this," she whispered. "He's had 3 months to perfect his performance," Kale murmured back. "Watch. He'll play the grieving regent, mourning his brother and nephew while consolidating power behind a mask of sorrow." As if on cue, a courtier approached the throne with a petition. Mordecai listened with apparent interest, nodded thoughtfully, then delivered a ruling that had the courtier bowing with gratitude. "See," Mordecai said to the assembled court. "This is what my brother would have wanted. Fair judgments. Swift resolutions. I carry on his legacy in his absence as he would have wished." Several courtiers murmured agreement. Ivana noticed that those who remained silent had hands that strayed to weapons hidden in their formal clothes. Not everyone believed Mordecai's performance. When? Ivana asked. Now, Darius said, and stepped into the throne room. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Several guards reached for their weapons before recognizing Darius and relaxing slightly. Mordecai's expression remained pleasant, but Ivana saw his fingers tighten on the throne's armrest. Commander Darius, he said warmly. You've returned. Tell me, did you find any trace of my poor nephew in your search? I did, Your Grace, Darius said, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. In fact, I found him very much alive. The throne room erupted in whispers. Mordecai's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. Alive? Commander, I appreciate your dedication, but we must face reality. My nephew perished with my brother 3 months ago. We held funeral rites. We mourned. We were lied to, Darius interrupted. Prince Taram survived the assassination attempt. He's been in hiding, recovering from his wounds, waiting for the right moment to return. This is a cruel joke, Mordecai said, standing. To give the kingdom false hope. It's not false hope, Ivana said, and stepped into the throne room. Every eye turned to her. She felt her Omega instinct screaming at her to submit, to bow, to acknowledge the power radiating from every alpha in the room. She ignored them with the kind of spite that had kept her alive for 6 months in the Whispering Woods. Who, Mordecai asked quietly, are you? Someone who found your nephew bleeding to death behind an oak tree, Ivana said. Someone who spent 3 weeks nursing him back to health while his uncle sat on a throne that didn't belong to him. The whispers grew louder. Mordecai's pleasant mask cracked slightly. You claim to have sheltered the prince? Where is he then? Show me this miraculous survivor. Taram stepped forward, lowering his hood. The throne room went silent. Ivana watched recognition ripple through the crowd. Some courtiers gasped. Others went pale. A few hands moved toward weapons, though whether to protect or attack, she couldn't tell. Mordecai stared at Taram with an expression that cycled through shock, anger, and calculation in the span of 3 seconds. When he spoke, his voice was thick with false emotion. Taram? Is it truly you? Hello, Uncle, Taram said calmly. I survived. Surprise. Mordecai descended from the throne, moving toward Taram with arms outstretched. My boy, we thought you were dead. The kingdom has mourned. I have mourned. If I'd known. You knew, Taram said quietly. You sent the assassins. You killed my father. You tried to kill me. The throne room exploded. Courtiers shouted. Guards drew weapons. Several nobles who'd been sitting stood so quickly their chairs fell backwards. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of accusation and denial and shock. Mordecai held up a hand, and slowly, the room quieted. His expression was one of wounded dignity. My nephew has been through trauma, he said to the assembled court. He's confused. Frightened. He doesn't know what he's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, Taram countered. You wanted the throne. Father stood in your way. So you had him killed and tried to eliminate me as well. The only reason I survived was because I jumped out a window in pup form. These are the ravings of a traumatized child, Mordecai said, his voice dripping with concern that didn't reach his eyes. Commander Darius, surely you don't believe. I believe the evidence, Darius said coldly. The king's horse was poisoned with nightshade. We found traces in its system during the investigation. Nightshade doesn't grow naturally in the royal stables, Your Grace. Someone put it there. An accident, surely. The prince was attacked by wolves in the castle, Kale added, stepping forward with Reese and Marcus flanking him. Wolves that wore the royal crest on their collars. Wolves that belonged to your personal guard. Mordecai's expression hardened. Circumstantial evidence. Speculation. You have no proof. We have the prince, Marcus rumbled. Alive. That's all the proof we need. The prince who's been missing for 3 months, Mordecai shot back. The prince who could have been influenced, coached, taught what to say by those who want to undermine my regency. How do we know this is even truly Taram? It's been 3 months. Children can be replaced. The implication hung in the air like poison. Ivana felt Taram tense beside her. She stepped forward, placing herself between the boy and his uncle. I know he's Taram because I've spent 3 weeks with him. I've heard him. Continue. 11:18 a.m. Talk about his father, about the stories Aldrich told him, the lessons he taught him, the love he showed him. Those aren't things that can be coached or faked. And who are you to make such claims? Mordecai asked, focusing on her with the intensity of a predator spotting prey. I rejected Omega, from what I can sense. No pack. No status. No reason for anyone to believe you over me. She's his guardian, Darius said. Bound by the law of life debt. She saved his life. That makes her testimony unassailable under ancient law. Mordecai laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Ancient law? We're going to trust ancient law over reason and evidence? This is ridiculous. Guards, escort these intruders from the throne room. We'll hold a proper inquiry, follow proper procedures. No, said a voice from the back of the room. An elderly woman stepped forward, her hair white as snow, her bearing regal despite her age. She wore formal robes marked with the sigil of the Council of Elders, the body that advised kings and upheld ancient traditions. Elder Miriam, Mordecai said, his pleasant mask sliding back into place. Surely you don't believe. I believe in the law of life debt, Miriam said firmly. I believe in the ancient magic that binds guardian to royal. And I believe, she fixed Mordecai with a look that could have frozen fire, that this court deserves to hear the prince's testimony without interference. The boy is traumatized. The boy is the crown prince, Miriam interrupted. He has a right to speak. We have an obligation to listen. Other voices rose in agreement. Not many. Mordecai had clearly spent 3 months building alliances, but enough. Enough to create doubt. Enough to force him to proceed carefully. Mordecai's jaw tightened, but he nodded graciously. Of course. Let the prince speak. Let him share his story. And then we'll determine the truth together, as a kingdom. He returned to the throne, sitting with the confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. Taram stepped forward, and despite his small size, despite his age, despite everything he'd endured, he stood before that throne room full of wolves and spoke with the authority of a future king. 3 months ago, I watched my father die, he began, his young voice carrying clearly through the silent room. I watched him fall from his horse, his neck broken, his eyes open but unseeing. I watched my uncle arrive moments later, his expression perfectly calibrated for grief. I watched him declare himself regent while my father's body was still warm. Mordecai's expression remained neutral, but Ivana saw his fingers drumming against the armrest, a tell, perhaps, that he wasn't as calm as he appeared. That night, wolves came to my room, Taram continued. They wore the royal crest. They said my uncle had sent them to ensure my safety. But they didn't take me to safety. They tried to take me to the royal crypts, where they planned to ensure I joined my father permanently. I shifted into pup form and ran. I ran through the castle walls, through the servants' passages my father had shown me during games of hide-and-seek. I ran until I reached the Whispering Woods, and even then, they followed. They caught me. They hurt me. And they would have killed me if not for Ivana. He turned to look at her, his ancient eyes holding gratitude and trust in equal measure. She found me. She saved me. She asked nothing in return. And now she's here, facing a court that doesn't know her, defending a prince she didn't ask to be bound to, because that's who she is. Ivana felt heat rising to her cheeks. This was not the plan. The plan did not involve Tara making her sound heroic when all she'd done was refuse to let a pup bleed to death. The law of life debt doesn't lie, Taram said, addressing the court. The magic knows truth. It binds guardian to royal when the save is genuine, when the intent is pure. If Ivana were lying, if I were an imposter, the bond wouldn't exist. But it does. Which means everything we're telling you is true. Magic can be faked, Mordecai said smoothly. Bonds can be manufactured by those with enough skill and desperation. Then test it, Miriam said. There are ways to verify a life debt bond. Ancient rituals that prove authenticity. I would welcome such a test, Darius added. As would the prince and his guardian, I'm sure. Mordecai's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been fear. That won't be necessary, he said. I believe my nephew. Of course I believe him. I'm simply concerned. He's been through so much. He needs rest, recovery, proper care. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion until he's had time to heal. No, Taram said firmly. No more delays. No more chances for you to consolidate power or eliminate threats. I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm claiming what's mine. You're 8 years old, Mordecai said, his mask finally slipping to reveal frustration beneath. You can't rule a kingdom. No, Taram agreed. But I can grow into the role with the right guidance. Guidance from people like Commander Darius, Elder Miriam, and my guardian. People who don't want me dead. The throne room erupted again, this time with arguments going both ways. Some courtiers supported Taram. Others sided with Mordecai. A few seemed genuinely confused about what was happening, which Ivana found relatable. Through it all, Mordecai sat on his throne, his expression calculating. Ivana had seen that look before on predators deciding whether prey was worth the effort of the hunt. She stepped closer to Taram, her Omega instincts screaming at her to protect, to defend, to fight if necessary. This isn't over, she whispered. No, Taram agreed. But we took the first step. We revealed the truth. Now we see who's brave enough to stand with it. As the throne room descended into chaos, arguments echoing off marble walls, Ivana realized that walking into this palace hadn't been the hard part. Surviving what came next, that was going to be the real challenge. But she'd survived rejection, isolation, and 6 months of talking to cobwebs. She could survive this too. She had to. Because somewhere between finding a wounded pup and standing before a court full of alphas, she'd found something worth fighting for. And she wasn't giving it up without a fight. Chapter 4: The Guardian's Gambit. The first assassination attempt came that night. Ivana was beginning to think the universe had a quota for how many times it could try to kill her per week, and it was determined to meet its goals. She woke to the sound of her door opening, a soft click that shouldn't have woken her, except she'd spent 6 months in the Whispering Woods where soft clicks usually meant something with teeth had found your cabin. Her hand closed around the knife she'd hidden under her pillow. The palace guards had wanted to confiscate it, citing security protocols and you can't bring weapons into the royal quarters. Ivana had explained, with the kind of firm politeness that left no room for argument, that the knife was non-negotiable. Darius had backed her up. Smart man. A shadow moved across her room, large, male, moving with the practiced silence of someone who'd done this before. He headed toward the door that connected her suite to Taram's quarters. Ivana was out of bed and moving before conscious thought caught up to instinct. She hit the intruder from behind, driving her knife toward what should have been his kidney. Should have been, except he moved at the last second, twisting with inhuman speed, catching her wrist in a grip that would leave bruises. Clever Omega, he murmured, his voice muffled by a black mask. But not clever enough. He threw her backwards. She hit the wall hard enough to see stars, but managed to keep hold of her knife. Omega she might be, but 6 months of surviving alone had taught her how to fight dirty. She lunged again, this time going for his eyes. He blocked, but the movement left his leg exposed. She kicked hard, connecting with his knee. He grunted, first sound of pain he'd made, and his grip loosened. Ivana twisted free, putting herself between the intruder and Taram's door. You'll have to go through me, she said. That, the intruder replied, pulling a wicked-looking blade from his belt, can be arranged. He moved. Ivana was pretty sure her life was about to become past tense when the intruder suddenly jerked backwards, a hand closing around his throat from behind. Darius stood there in sleeping clothes, his expression murderous. Explain, he said quietly, why you're in the Guardian's quarters threatening her life. Just following orders, the intruder choked out. Whose orders? The intruder smiled behind his mask. Then his eyes rolled back, foam appearing at the corners of his mouth. Poison pill, Darius said, releasing the now convulsing body. Of course. He looked at Ivana. Are you hurt? Bruised ego, mostly, Ivana said, willing her hands to stop shaking. He was going for Taram. They'll keep trying, Darius said grimly, checking the intruder's pulse and finding none. Mordecai knows he's lost the element of surprise. Now he's racing against time, trying to eliminate Taram before the Council of Elders can call for a formal investigation. How did you know to come? I didn't, Darius admitted. I was doing patrol rounds. Heard the commotion. Lucky timing. Destiny, Ivana corrected. Lucky timing is finding gold in your pocket. This was destiny throwing me a bone because it felt guilty about Thursday. Darius's lips twitched. Your relationship with Destiny is complicated. Destiny and I need couples counseling. The door to Taram's room opened. The boy stood there in sleeping clothes, his ancient eyes taking in the scene with disturbing calm. Another one? He asked. How many have there been? Ivana demanded. 3 since we arrived, Taram said. For now. They're getting bold. 3. Ivana looked at Darius. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you needed sleep, Darius said. And because we've been handling it. By handling it, you mean they keep trying to kill him and you keep stopping them? That's generally what handling it means in our profession, yes. Ivana wanted to scream. Or hit something. Or possibly hit Darius while screaming. This is not sustainable. Eventually, one of them will get through. Eventually, we'll have enough evidence to prove Mordecai's guilt, Darius said. Every failed assassination attempt adds to our case. Every assassin we capture dies from poison pills before they can talk, Ivana finished. Great plan. Very sustainable. I'm sure Taram appreciates being live bait. I don't mind, Taram said. Well, I mind. Ivana's voice pitched higher than intended. I didn't save you from bleeding out behind an oak tree just to watch you get murdered in a palace by your sociopathic uncle. Silence fell. Ivana realized she'd just shouted at the commander of the royal guard and the crown prince in equal measure. Her Omega instincts were filing formal complaints about her life choices. Sorry, she muttered. Long day. Dead assassin on my floor. I'm a bit stressed. Understandable, Darius said, his expression softening. But Ivana, we really are doing everything we can to keep him safe. Then let me help, Ivana said. I'm his guardian. Literally. It's in my job description according to ancient law. Use me. You're an Omega, Darius said carefully. No offense, but you're not built for combat against trained assassins. I just fought off a trained assassin. You got lucky. I got scrappy, Ivana corrected. There's a difference. Lucky is tripping and accidentally headbutting your opponent. Scrappy is knowing where to kick to make grown men question their life choices. Kale appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He took in the dead assassin, Ivana's defensive posture, and Darius's exasperated expression, and smiled. She fought off another one? Fought off is generous, Ivana said. More like delayed until reinforcements arrived. Still impressive for an Omega, Kale said, then caught Ivana's glare. Not because Omegas are weak, he added quickly. Because assassins are specifically trained to counter Omega instincts. The fact that you didn't immediately submit when he used his alpha presence is remarkable. I don't do submission, Ivana said. It's against my religion. What religion is that? The Church of Spite. We meet Tuesdays. Reese arrived next, followed by Marcus, both in various states of undress and weaponry. Apparently, the entire guard rotation had heard the commotion and decided to investigate. This is the 4th attempt tonight, Marcus said, examining the body. They're accelerating. Because tomorrow, the Council of Elders meets to discuss Taram's claim, Darius said. Mordecai needs him dead before then. If the Council formally recognizes Taram as Crown Prince, killing him becomes exponentially more difficult. Right now, he's just a boy making accusations. Tomorrow, he could be a prince under official protection. So tonight is Mordecai's last good chance to eliminate the problem, Ivana said. Yes. Then we need to make sure he can't take it. Ivana looked at Taram. Where's the safest place in this palace? The vault, Taram said. 3 levels down, protected by guards, magical wards, and enough security to make paranoia look rational. Can we access it? I'm the Crown Prince, Taram said with a small smile. I can access anything. Then that's where you're spending the night, Ivana decided. All of us. The 4 guards, you, me. We hole up in the vault until morning, until the council meeting. Mordecai can't kill what he can't reach. The vault isn't designed for overnight stays, Darius said. It's designed to store valuables, not people. So we'll be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable for 6 months. I'm excellent at uncomfortable. Ivana crossed her arms. Unless you have a better plan? Darius exchanged glances with his fellow guards. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that came from years of working together, of trusting each other with their lives. The Omega has a point, Reese said finally. Hiding in plain sight isn't working. Every time we think we've secured Taram's quarters, another assassin finds a way in. The vault at least limits access points. It also limits escape routes, Kale pointed out. We won't need escape routes if we're not being attacked, Ivana argued. You're assuming Mordecai won't find a way to breach the vault. I'm assuming he'll try. I'm counting on you four to make sure he fails. Marcus rumbled his approval. I like her. She's practical. She's reckless, Darius corrected, but his expression had shifted from exasperated to considering. But it might work. If we can keep Taram safe until the council meeting, we win. Mordecai loses his window of opportunity. So we're doing this? Ivana asked. We're camping out in a vault like the world's most paranoid sleepover party? We're doing this, Darius confirmed. Though I'm adding sleepover party to my list of phrases I never thought I'd hear in a military context. You're welcome for the enrichment, Ivana said. They moved quickly after that, gathering supplies and making their way through the palace's hidden passages toward the vault. Taram led the way. He knew the palace better than anyone, having spent his entire childhood exploring its secrets. Father used to bring me down here, he said as they descended stone steps that predated most of the current palace structure. He said every king should know the vault's location, in case they ever needed to access emergency resources. Did he expect to need them? Ivana asked. He expected to be prepared, Taram said. Father was good at preparing for everything. Except his own brother's betrayal. The pain in his voice made Ivana's heart ache. She put a hand on his shoulder, offering silent comfort. The vault door was impressive, solid steel reinforced with silver, covered in runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. Taram pressed his hand to the center, and the runes flared bright before the door swung open with a sound like distant thunder. Inside was exactly what Ivana expected, shelves of treasures, chests of gold, artifacts that probably had more history than her entire bloodline. What she didn't expect was the comfortable reading nook in the corner, complete with chairs, books, and what looked like emergency supplies. Father set this up, Taram explained, seeing her expression. He said if we ever needed to use the vault as a safe room, we should at least be comfortable. Your father, Ivana said, was a practical man. He was a good man, Taram corrected softly. I miss him. I know. They settled in for what was probably going to be the longest night of Ivana's life. The guards took positions by the door, rotating watch despite being in theoretically the safest place in the palace. Taram curled up in one of the chairs with a book, his earlier calm facade cracking slightly now that he was safe. Ivana sat beside him, close enough to provide comfort, but far enough to let him breathe. Thank you, Taram said after a while. For what? For fighting for me. You didn't have to. The life debt bond compels you to protect me, but it doesn't compel you to care. You could do the minimum required by magic and nothing more. But you're here, planning strategies, fighting assassins, camping out in vaults. You're here because you want to be. Ivana felt something tight in her chest loosen. You remind me, she said slowly, that there are things worth protecting in this world. I spent 6 months convincing myself I didn't need anyone, that being alone was safer than risking connection. Then you showed up, bleeding and small and absolutely determined to survive, and you reminded me why connection matters. Because we're stronger together? Because we're less lonely together, Ivana corrected. Strength is nice. But companionship? That's survival. Taram leaned against her shoulder. I'm glad destiny bound us. Even though I'm a rejected Omega with questionable stew-making skills? Especially because of that, Taram said. Queens and nobles would have seen a prince and treated me like a political piece. You saw a wounded pup and treated me like I mattered. That's worth more than any crown. Ivana blinked rapidly, absolutely not crying in a vault surrounded by royal guards who definitely didn't need to see her emotional. Your Majesty, Darius said from his position by the door, I think you just made your guardian cry. It's allergies, Ivana said. To emotional vulnerability? To smartass commanders who don't know when to shut up. Kale laughed. Reese grinned. Marcus made a sound that might have been approval or indigestion. With him, it was hard to tell. And sitting there in that vault, surrounded by treasures and guards and one small prince who'd accidentally become her entire world, Ivana thought that maybe destiny had known what it was doing after all. She still wanted her cabin back. Still wanted her quiet life, her herb garden, her conversations with cobwebs who didn't pay rent. But she also wanted this. This warmth. This belonging. This feeling of being part of something larger than survival. So when the sun rose the next morning and Darius announced it was time to face the council, Ivana stood up straight, squared her shoulders, and prepared to walk into whatever fresh hell destiny had planned. Because she was a rejected Omega who'd survived 6 months alone in the Whispering Woods. She could survive anything. Even political intrigue and murderous uncles, and the very real possibility that today would end with either triumph or tragedy. She was ready. Mostly. Okay, she was terrified. But she was terrified with purpose, and that had to count for something. Chapter 5. The Crown and the Omega. The Council of Elders met in a chamber that made the throne room look modest. Ivana stood beside Taram, trying not to gawk at the vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of historical coronations, the marble columns carved with the names of every king who'd ever ruled, and the circular table where 12 elders sat in judgment. Elder Miriam presided at the head of the table, her white hair braided with silver thread, her expression carved from stone and centuries of political experience. The other elders ranged from middle-aged to ancient, each representing different territories and traditions within the kingdom. Mordecai sat to Miriam's right, his posture relaxed, his expression one of patient tolerance. Like he was humoring a child's fantasy rather than facing accusations of regicide. Ivana wanted to hit him with a poker. We are here, Miriam began, her voice carrying through the chamber without effort, to address the return of Crown Prince Taram and the accusations levied against Regent Mordecai. This is not a trial. This is an inquiry. We seek truth, not vengeance. I appreciate the council's wisdom, Mordecai said smoothly. Though I must admit, I'm confused about why we're here at all. My nephew has returned, a blessing beyond measure. Why must we taint his homecoming with conspiracy theories? Because someone tried to murder him, Taram said flatly. Multiple times. Including 4 attempts last night. Murmurs rippled through the assembled witnesses, nobles, guards, and courtiers who'd been permitted to observe the proceedings. Allegations, Mordecai said. From a traumatized child who's been missing for 3 months. We don't know what he experienced, what he was told, what he was taught to believe. We know he nearly died, Darius said, stepping forward. We know assassins have been targeting him since he returned to the palace. We know you've had 3 months to consolidate power while claiming your nephew is dead. Circumstantial, Mordecai countered. Commander Darius, I respect your service to the crown. But you're allowing emotion to cloud your judgment. You want someone to blame for King Aldrich's death. I understand. I want the same. But manufacturing guilt won't bring my brother back. Neither will sitting on his throne while plotting to murder his son, Ivana said. Every eye turned to her. Her Omega instincts screamed at her to shut up, to submit, to let the Alphas handle this. She told her instincts to file a complaint with her cobweb. The Omega speaks, Mordecai said, his tone dripping with condescension. Tell me, how long have you known my nephew? 3 weeks? And in that time, you've become an expert on royal politics, assassination plots, and the inner workings of a kingdom. I've become an expert on recognizing predators, Ivana shot back. I was rejected by my mate 6 months ago. You know what I learned from that experience? How to spot someone who's good at lying. Someone who says all the right things while doing all the wrong ones. Someone who wears concern like a costume while plotting destruction. You compare me to your failed mate? Mordecai's expression hardened. How dare? She dares, Taram interrupted, because she's right. You're exactly like her former mate. All performance, no substance. You sit on that throne like you belong there, but you're just an understudy who killed the lead actor so you could take his place. The chamber erupted. Elder Miriam banged a ceremonial gavel that looked like it could double as a weapon. Order. We will have order. Slowly, the noise subsided. Prince Taram, Miriam said, you've made serious accusations. If you have evidence, present it now. I have testimony, Taram said. Mine. I was there the night my father died. I watched my uncle arrive moments after the accident. I saw his expression. It wasn't shock. It wasn't grief. It was satisfaction. A child's interpretation, Mordecai said. Unreliable at best. I also have these, Darius said, placing a leather satchel on the table. He opened it, revealing 4 collars marked with the royal crest. These were worn by the wolves who attacked Prince Taram in the castle. They belong to your personal guard, Your Grace. Mordecai's expression didn't change, but Ivana saw his jaw tighten. My personal guard were assigned to protect the prince. If they were in his quarters. They were trying to drag him to the crypts, Taram said. One of them told me you'd ordered them to ensure my safety permanently. Those were his exact words. Hearsay, Mordecai said. The word of a frightened child against trained guards. Guards who conveniently died that night, Kale added. All 4 of them. Along with their handler. Tragic accident, according to your report. Are you suggesting I killed my own guards? I'm suggesting, Kale said coldly, that you eliminate witnesses the way some people eliminate weeds. Thoroughly and without hesitation. One of the elders, an older woman with kind eyes and iron-gray hair, raised her hand. I have a question for the guardian. Ivana's stomach dropped. Yes, Elder. Elder Catherine, the woman supplied. You saved the prince's life. The life debt bond formed. Tell me, what does the bond tell you about his claims? I'm not sure I understand. The life debt doesn't just bind Guardian to Royal, Catherine explained. It also connects them emotionally. You can sense his truth, his pain, his fears. What does that sense tell you about his accusations? Ivana closed her eyes, reaching for that strange connection she'd been trying to ignore for days. It was there, humming beneath her consciousness, a thread of awareness that let her feel Taram's emotions as if they were her own. She felt his grief for his father, his fear of his uncle, his determination to see justice done. And beneath it all, she felt his truth. Bone deep, absolute, unshakable truth. He's not lying, Ivana said, opening her eyes. The bond would tell me if he was. I'd feel doubt, uncertainty, the kind of emotional dissonance that comes from fabrication. But there's none of that. Only grief. Only anger. Only the desperate need for someone, anyone, to believe him. The bond can be fooled, Mordecai said. Magic is not infallible. But it's more reliable than your performance, Ivana countered. You've been playing the grieving regent for 3 months. You've been good at it. But grief doesn't plot assassinations. Grief doesn't try to murder children. Grief doesn't sit on a throne that was stolen through fratricide. Prove it, Mordecai said, his pleasant mask finally cracking to reveal the predator beneath. Prove I killed my brother. Prove I ordered the attacks. Prove anything beyond circumstantial evidence and the testimony of traumatized children and rejected Omegas. We're working on it, Darius said. Every assassin we've captured has died before providing testimony, Mordecai finished. Convenient for you. You can claim anything without fear of contradiction. Or convenient for you, Reese said. Poison pills don't distribute themselves. Someone's been very careful to ensure no assassin survives capture. Someone with resources, access, and a vested interest in keeping the prince dead. Speculation. Truth, Marcus rumbled. We've traced the poison to a supplier in the lower city. The same supplier who provides interesting substances to the palace. The same supplier who has your personal seal on his ledger. For the first time, Mordecai looked genuinely worried. Those seals could be forged. We have the supplier in custody, Darius said. He's been very cooperative. Especially after we offered him immunity in exchange for testimony. The color drained from Mordecai's face. Ivana felt a surge of satisfaction. They had him. Finally, they had him. But Mordecai wasn't finished. He stood, his expression transforming into something cold and calculating. Interesting. You have a supplier who claims I ordered poison. You have collars that supposedly prove I ordered attacks. You have a child's testimony and an Omega's intuition. And you think that's enough to condemn me? It's a start, Miriam said, her tone icy. Then let me offer a counter-proposal, Mordecai said. Trial by combat. The chamber went silent. Ancient law, Mordecai continued, allows any accused noble to demand trial by combat. I choose my champion. My accuser chooses theirs. The moon goddess decides who speaks truth through strength. That law, Elder Catherine said slowly, hasn't been invoked in 2 centuries. But it's still law, Mordecai said. I invoke it now. Let the goddess judge between me and my accusers. Taram stepped forward. I accept. No, Ivana said immediately. Absolutely not. You're 8 years old. You can't. I can choose a champion, Taram said. That's how trial by combat works. I choose. Me, Ivana interrupted. Every single person in the chamber stared at her. I'm sorry, Mordecai said, his voice dripping with false concern. Did the Omega just volunteer to be a champion? I'm his guardian, Ivana said, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. Bound by the life debt. If anyone has the right to fight for him, it's me. You're an Omega, Mordecai said. Champions must be combat-trained warriors. You're neither. The law, Miriam said, consulting an ancient tome, states that any guardian bound by life debt may serve as champion for their charge. There are no restrictions based on designation or combat training. That's insane, Mordecai sputtered. She'll be killed in seconds. Is that what you want? The prince's guardian slaughtered in front of him. I'll take my chances, Ivana said, though internally she was screaming. What was she doing? She'd fought off one assassin through luck and spite. Trial by combat would pit her against a trained warrior who'd been specifically chosen to kill her. She was going to die. But if she didn't accept, if she let someone else fight for Taram, she'd be admitting she wasn't worthy of being his guardian. She'd be proving Mordecai right, that she was just a rejected Omega with no business being in the palace. And damn if she was going to give him that satisfaction. I'll fight, she said firmly. Choose your champion. Mordecai smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. I choose Fenrir, former commander of the Royal Guard. Undefeated in 52 challenges. Winner of the Northern Territories Combat Championship 3 years running. I trust he'll be adequate. A massive wolf stepped forward from the assembled guards. He was built like Marcus, all muscle and controlled violence, but where Marcus had warmth in his eyes, Fenrir had only cold calculation. This will be quick, Fenrir said, his voice like gravel. I'll try to make it painless. How considerate, Ivana said, her voice not shaking at all. Definitely not shaking. The shaking was just tremors in the floor. Earthquakes. Totally normal. The combat will take place in 3 days, Miriam announced. That gives both parties time to prepare. Until then, Crown Prince Taram will remain under guard in secure quarters. Regent Mordecai will be confined to his own quarters, with limited access to palace resources. This is an outrage, Mordecai protested. I'm being imprisoned in my own palace? You're being given comfortable accommodations while serious accusations are investigated, Miriam corrected. Be grateful we're not throwing you in the dungeons. Mordecai's expression promised retribution, but he bowed. As the council wishes. The meeting adjourned. Ivana found herself surrounded immediately by the 4 guards, all wearing varying expressions of concern, disbelief, and what might have been grudging admiration. You challenged a former commander to trial by combat, Darius said. Please explain your reasoning. I panicked, Ivana admitted. Is that good reasoning? It's honest reasoning. You're going to die, Kale said bluntly. Fenrir is. He's one of the best warriors in the kingdom. He's trained his entire life for combat. You've trained your entire life for herb gathering and cobweb arguments. Those cobwebs were formidable opponents, Ivana protested weakly. She has 3 days, Reese said thoughtfully. We could train her. Basic defense, how to exploit weaknesses, where to strike for maximum damage. In 3 days, Marcus rumbled. We'd need 3 years. Then we make the most of the time we have, Taram said, his young face set with determination. Ivana fought for me. Now we fight for her. I appreciate the sentiment, Ivana said, but I'm pretty sure fighting for me. Continue. 11:22 a.m. Looks a lot like planning my funeral. Don't, Taram said fiercely. Don't give up before you've even tried. You survived 6 months alone. You survived rejection. You saved my life. You're stronger than you think. I'm an Omega who makes terrible stew and talks to cobwebs. You're a guardian who's faced down assassins, royal guards, and murderous regents without backing down, Darius corrected. That takes a special kind of courage. Now we just need to give you the skills to match it. Ivana looked at their faces, these 4 alphas who'd somehow become her pack, this one small prince who'd become her purpose, and felt something settle in her chest. She was going to lose. The odds were insurmountable. Fenrir would probably kill her within the first minute of combat. But she'd go down fighting. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. All right, she said. 3 days. Teach me how to not die immediately. We'll teach you how to win, Darius said. Let's start with not die immediately and see where we end up, Ivana countered. As they led her toward the training grounds, Ivana sent up a quick prayer to the moon goddess. If you're listening, and if you actually have a plan here, now would be a great time to share it. Because from where I'm standing, this looks a lot like destiny setting me up for a spectacular failure. Also, if I survive this, I'm going back to my cabin and never leaving. Just thought you should know. Signed, a very stressed Omega who's starting to think rejection wasn't actually the worst thing that could happen. The moon goddess, as usual, didn't respond. But somewhere in the distance, Ivana could have sworn she heard laughter. Destiny, apparently, had a sense of humor. She just wished it wasn't at her expense. The training yard was less motivational training montage and more systematic documentation of all the ways Ivana could die. Again, Darius said for what felt like the 100th time. Ivana picked herself up off the ground, again, and raised her practice sword again. Her arms ached. Her legs ached. Parts of her she didn't know existed were lodging formal complaints about her life choices. I'm going to die, she panted. Not with that attitude, Kale said, circling her with the predatory grace of someone who'd been doing this since childhood. You're thinking like an Omega. You need to think like a survivor. I am a survivor. I survived 6 months alone. You survived by avoiding conflict, Reese corrected, watching from the sidelines. This time, you have to run toward it. Big difference. Ivana lunged at Kale, putting everything she had into the strike. He deflected it easily, using her momentum against her, sending her sprawling again. You're too predictable, he said, offering her a hand up. Fenrir will read your attacks before you make them. You need to be chaotic. Unpredictable. Use your Omega instincts instead of fighting against them. My Omega instincts are telling me to submit and hope he kills me quickly. Then your Omega instincts need better advice, Marcus said. He'd been watching silently until now, his massive arms crossed over his chest. You're thinking this is about strength. It's not. You'll never be stronger than Fenrir. But you can be smarter, faster, more desperate. I'm already desperate. Then weaponize it. Over the next 3 days, they taught her everything they could cram into a crash course in not dying. Darius showed her pressure points, places where even a weak strike could cause disproportionate damage. Kale taught her how to read body language, how to anticipate attacks. Reese drilled her on endurance, how to keep moving when every muscle screamed for rest. Marcus taught her the most important lesson of all, how to embrace being underestimated. Fenrir expects you to fight like a warrior, Marcus explained on the second day. He's prepared for techniques, strategies, formal combat styles. So don't give him any of those. Fight like someone with nothing to lose. Scratch, bite, go for the eyes. Use every dirty trick you know. I don't know any dirty tricks. Then we'll teach you. They did. By the end of the second day, Ivana had learned 17 different ways to cause pain with minimal effort, 5 strategies for exploiting overconfidence, and 1 particularly effective technique involving a knee, a strategic strike, and the future possibility of Fenrir having children. That's evil, she said when Marcus demonstrated. That's survival, he corrected. On the 3rd day, Taram joined the training. He watched from the sidelines, his ancient eyes tracking every movement, every strategy. You're getting better, he said during a break. I'm getting less immediately terrible, Ivana corrected, downing water like it was going out of style. There's a difference. You're going to win. Your Majesty, with all due respect, you're terrible at predictions. Remember when you said the stew I made was probably edible? We both know how that turned out. The stew was a learning experience. The stew was a crime against cuisine. Taram smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. If you die. I won't die, Ivana said, with more confidence than she felt. I've got too much spite to die. Death would be admitting Mordecai won. I'm not giving him that satisfaction. Promise? Ivana wanted to promise. She wanted to swear on everything she held dear that she'd survive, that she'd protect him, that destiny wouldn't be cruel enough to bind them together just to tear them apart. But she learned not to make promises she couldn't keep. I promise I'll fight like hell, she said instead. The rest is up to the moon goddess. The night before the trial, Ivana couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of her quarters, looking out over the palace grounds, wondering if this would be the last night she saw them. Footsteps behind her announced Darius's arrival. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Too busy making my peace with mortality. Cheerful. I try. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. You know, Darius said finally, when you hit Kale with that poker on the first night, I thought you were insane. And Omega, threatening royal guards, protecting a pup you barely knew. I thought you were brave or stupid or possibly both. Definitely both, Ivana confirmed. But watching you these past days, training even when exhausted, standing up to Mordecai in the council chamber, accepting trial by combat to protect Taram, I realize you're neither brave nor stupid. You're something rarer. You're someone who sees what needs doing and does it, consequences be damned. Is this a pep talk or a eulogy? It's an observation, Darius said. And a promise. If tomorrow goes badly, if Fenrir is too much, we'll get you out. We won't let you die for this. If I retreat, Mordecai wins by default. Taram loses his claim. Everything we've fought for means nothing if you're dead, Darius interrupted. You're important, Ivana. Not just as Taram's guardian. As a person. As someone who's brought something to this palace that's been missing for too long. What's that? Hope, Darius said simply. You remind us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That rejection doesn't define worth. That talking to cobwebs about rent isn't a sign of insanity, but of creative problem-solving. Despite everything, Ivana laughed. You're terrible at pep talks. I'm aware. But thank you, she added softly. For training me. For believing I could do this, even when I didn't believe it myself. You'll do more than survive tomorrow, Darius said. You'll win. I feel it. That's either prophecy or indigestion. With my diet, could be both. When dawn came, Ivana dressed in the combat leathers the guards had prepared, reinforced at vital points, flexible enough to move, dark enough to hide bloodstains. She tried not to think about whose blood they'd be hiding. The combat arena was packed. It seemed the entire palace wanted to witness either Ivana's triumph or her spectacular failure. She was betting most were expecting the latter. Fenrir waited in the center of the arena, looking like violence given form. He was even larger than she remembered, his muscles coiled with the promise of devastation. Ivana walked to meet him, her practice sword, now replaced with a real blade, heavy in her hand. Last chance to withdraw, Fenrir said. I respect your courage, Omega. But courage doesn't stop steel. Neither does overconfidence, Ivana replied. But we're both about to find out. Miriam stood to address the crowd. By ancient law and moon goddess's judgment, we witness trial by combat. Prince Taram, accused by Regent Mordecai of conspiracy. Guardian Ivana, champion of the prince. Fenrir, champion of the regent. Combat ends with yield, unconsciousness, or death. May the goddess guide the worthy. Ready? Fenrir asked. No, Ivana said honestly. But let's do this anyway. A gong sounded. Fenrir moved. And Ivana, rejected Omega and cobweb negotiator, fought for her life. The first strike nearly killed her. Fenrir's blade came down with the force of destiny and poor life choices. Ivana rolled left, feeling the blade pass inches from her spine. Don't fight like a warrior. Marcus's words echoed. Fight like someone with nothing to lose. She came up swinging, not at Fenrir, but at his knee, the same knee she'd damaged on the assassin. He blocked, but the movement was defensive. She'd made him react to her. Small victory. Clever, Fenrir acknowledged. But cleverness won't save you. He attacked again, a whirlwind of strikes that drove Ivana backwards. She blocked what she could, dodged what she couldn't, and felt her arms screaming with each impact. This was impossible. He was too fast, too strong, too trained. But Ivana had spent 6 months in the Whispering Woods. She knew impossible. She'd survived impossible. She could survive this. She started fighting dirty. When Fenrir swung high, she went low not with her blade, but with her feet, sweeping his legs. He stumbled. She struck at his exposed ribs. The blade bounced off armor, but his breath hitched. Another small victory. You fight without honor, Fenrir said. I fight to win, Ivana corrected. There's a difference. The battle raged. Minutes felt like hours. Ivana took hits, a slice across her arm, a brutal strike to her shoulder that sent fire down her spine. But she kept moving, kept attacking, kept refusing to die. Because Taram was watching. Because destiny had bound them. Because she'd survived rejection and isolation and 6 months of talking to cobwebs, and she'd be damned if she let some overdeveloped alpha with a superiority complex end her story. You're stronger than you look, Fenrir admitted, breathing hard now. You're exactly as arrogant as you look, Ivana shot back. She saw her opening. Fenrir raised his blade for what would be a killing blow, and for just a moment, his guard lowered. Ivana moved. Not toward his blade, but toward him. She dropped her sword, closed the distance, and did exactly what Marcus had taught her. Fenrir went down with a sound that was part shock, part agony, and entirely satisfying. That's for trying to kill me, Ivana said, retrieving her sword and pressing it to his throat. Yield. Fenrir, tears streaming down his face, nodded. I yield. The arena erupted. Ivana stepped back, her sword arm shaking, her entire body screaming with exhaustion and pain. She'd won. Somehow, impossibly, against all odds, she'd won. Taram rushed to her, hugging her with the force of someone who'd thought they'd lost everything. You did it, he whispered. You actually did it. I fought dirty, Ivana admitted. You fought smart, Darius corrected, appearing beside them with the rest of the guard. That's all that matters. Miriam stood, her expression grave but satisfied. The moon goddess has spoken. Trial by combat has determined truth. Prince Taram's accusations stand. Regent Mordecai, you are hereby stripped of your title and will stand trial for regicide, attempted murder, and crimes against the crown. Mordecai's face was a mask of fury. This isn't over, he snarled. You think trial by combat proves anything? You think. I think, Taram said, his young voice carrying through the arena, that you underestimated everyone. My father. Me. Ivana. You thought being Omega meant being weak. You thought being young meant being powerless. You thought you could murder and scheme your way to a throne. He stepped forward, and despite his age, despite his size, he radiated authority. But the throne isn't about power. It's about service. Something you never understood. Something you'll never understand. Guards, take him away. They did, and as Mordecai was led from the arena, screaming threats and promises of vengeance, Ivana felt the last of her adrenaline fade. Her legs gave out. Darius caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you. I fought dirty, Ivana said again, because apparently that was the only thing her exhausted brain could process. You fought perfect, Darius corrected. And as the arena cheered, as Taram laughed with relief, as the guards surrounded her with protection and pride in equal measure, Ivana thought that maybe, just maybe, destiny had actually worked out. She'd left her cabin a rejected Omega. She was ending this as a champion, a guardian, and part of a pack that had chosen her as fiercely as she'd chosen them. Not bad for someone who argued with cobwebs. Not bad at all. The end.
If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it.